globally, the greatest challenge for the church globally is to be serious about poverty and famine. Is that there are literally right now millions of people who don't have food to eat each day in a world where there's plenty of food for everyone.
We need your help, man. If you haven't already hit the subscribe button and joined our community, do it now. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. You'll be the first to hear our latest stories and strategies.
Plus, subscribing helps us grow and reach more people just like you. It's a win-win. Your support means the world to us, and it motivates us to keep leveling up our game.
Don't forget, hit the notification bell too, all right? You're always going to be in the loop with the new episodes drop. We release new content every Thursday at noon Eastern.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button now. And let's continue this journey together.
Thanks for all your support, everyone. We can't wait to see where this journey takes us next.
Until next time.
Peace.
Welcome back to another episode of Level Up with Larry and Leo, where we turn trials into opportunities and dreams into reality. Today, we are honored to have a very special guest, a man that has spent over 27 years leading and serving the community, Pastor Wayne Lomax. Pastor Lomax is not only a visionary leader, but someone who has dedicated his life to empowering others, building strong communities, and impacting future generations. From founding the Fountain Church to emerging ministries and building partnerships that feed families, support students, and inspire countless lives, his influence has truly made a difference in South Florida and beyond.
That's right, Larry. We're excited to dive into Pastor Lomax's journey today, learn about his incredible career, his transition into retirement, which few pastors have the privilege of retiring as pastors, and what's next for him as he continues to pursue his passion for developing the next generation.
Yes, sir. Before we jump into that conversation, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Next Level Media Marketing, helping organizations break through growth barriers, and Curb & Key, a leader in real estate solutions.
Pastor Lomax, thank you so much for joining us. What I always say is that time is our most precious commodity. We don't know how much of it we have, and once we spend it, we can't bring it back. Only God can redeem the time. So thank you so much for being here. We're thrilled to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Leo and Larry. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you on this great podcast. And it's funny that you said we don't know how much time we have. I know how much time I don't have. So I've been here on the earth a minute. So I'm saying, okay, maybe I got 25 or 30 years left. I got to make the most of it. But this is a great opportunity. I love what the two of you are doing. Look forward to the chat that we're going to have today.
Awesome. So, sir, we'd like to start in the beginning. You've had over 27 years in the pastoral leadership at the Fountain, but I believe your journey in ministry started over 45 years ago. What first inspired you to step into ministry, and how has that inspiration evolved over the years?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think I ended my ministry sort of on a peak in a way that my skill sets, my understanding of ministry was probably at its greatest level when I retired. But I had been in ministry since I was about 22 years old. And that's really all I've done all of my adult life. I did a couple of years as a chemist, but while I was functioning as a chemist, I was on the side. My side gig was always ministry. So that's what I've always done. And so, I got started in college really through a couple of terrible, difficult incidents. My grade point average, plummeted. I wasn't making the progress academically. I aspired to be a doctor. And so in the context of all these challenges and difficulties, I became a Christian. I gave my life to Christ, went to church one Sunday, trying to get a telephone number, ended up making a commitment to Jesus. I said, God, you something else. They get the number now. You and I connected. And so, the call it came subsequent to that. And it's crazy because it's not something that I ever wanted to do. So in the Bible, when I look at call stories, whether it's Moses, could be Amos, could be Noah, many of these individuals, God is plucking them out of a place and placing them into another place that they're not asking to do. They're not asking to go. And so many times in the call, when we're doing ministry, we are doing something that we feel very much compelled to do by a power greater than ourselves. And yet at the same time, we don't really want to do it. So
Yeah.
it's always a conflict that's going on in the life of many of us who are called. And so that was my experience from start even until retirement, that, I've always had that conflict. Well, I'm doing this, God, you called me to do this, but I'd really rather be doing something else, to be honest with you. And so I think Moses, God set Moses up. He said, Moses, I've heard the crying of my people, and I'm coming down to rescue them. He said, but I'm going to send you, So I said, well, why don't you go rescue them, God, And so that's kind of how God does, he uses us to influence these challenges that exist within our communities and families and neighborhoods. And so that was my journey. And I dove in, I prepared myself, went to seminary. I thought my seminary training really was a big help in how I understand the Bible, how I interpret it and apply it. And I think both of those principles are really important for people who lead ministry. Is that you have a Bible, you must have some skill sets and tools and principles by which you interpret it, which then lead to application, because you can only apply what you have interpreted.
Excellent. So let me get a little deeper dichotomy of call and talk to us about what was your transition? What was your pivot point? What was the mindset shift that said, okay, all right, God, you got me. I'll walk different. I'll limp over and I'll do what you've called me to do. I'll stop fighting you. Do you have any time period that you could point to that you were, between two opinions, that you were like, okay, I love chemistry. I love what I'm doing. I love what I'm going towards, but I know that there's a calling and a people that God has called me to help and uplift. What was that struggle, and how did you say, okay, God, I surrender. I'll follow your will?
Yeah, God set me up by kind of touching a passion that I didn't know that I had. And so my aspiration since seventh grade was to be a physician. I'm in my third year of studying chemistry at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Not doing well academically. It's the first time in my life that I'm not doing well academically. I've always done well academically, but my grade point average has plummeted. And so I'm struggling. So, that probably was some kind of motivation, say, Lord, I need help. Here I am, But then what happened was, when I got involved with the ministry on campus, the pastor began to assign us these community projects. And so we would have to serve people in the community as a part of the campus ministry. And so he had me lead this project where there's helping this lady who lived in his house. She had a landlord who, for some reason, the house was in disrepair. It was leaking. It was filled. To this day, I have never seen more roaches in one place. I mean, these roaches had they had like fantasy basketball leagues. They had they had barbecues. These roaches were organized. They're moving back and forth. I mean, they were out during the day. Usually roaches hang out at night. Man, it was a terrible situation. And so as a college student, I kind of got involved with her life to see if we could get the landlord to say, listen, we need to get the toilets fixed. We need to exterminate the house, because she was really old and didn't have much resources. And finally, we got to move to another place. So that was always been something. I didn't know it until then, that I had a passion for people. I was in Coconut Grove and Liberty City and Overtown yesterday, and there's some aspects of it that are really beautiful, but I saw some things. I said, wow, there really needs to be a continual help in situations where people are born into disadvantages, and there's such a thing as an advantage and a disadvantage in terms of where you start. And so being involved in the ministry and in the Christian church kind of revealed that I have a passion for serving people who are in need of help. And I think that's what God, I would probably have never done it if I'd gone straight to medical school. I want to help patients, but there's a step beyond that, beyond your practice. And the way I pastor, I always tried to serve people outside of our church without requiring them to be a part of our church. And so, so that's how I.
Let's talk about your career as a pastor. So throughout your leadership career, you've had the unique ability to merge community, which you just talked about, especially with a successful merger of New Life International and the Fountain of Pembroke Pines. Merging a church that's no easy feat. What key challenges and opportunities that you saw during the process, and how did you approach it?
Yeah, regarding the church merger.
Yes.
Yeah. I appreciate that question. So I've been involved in 2 church mergers. So my ministry started in a city called Pembroke Pines. And so it's a suburban city, relatively affluent in 1997, a high degree of college graduates, et cetera, professional community. And our church was comprised of persons who mirrored that type of profile. And so we grew, we did really well. But we didn't have we rented the space that we occupied, and it was very expensive. And I just thought that it would be better for the congregation to own, just because of the cost of the lease. The lease was $35,000 a month. And I just said, well, this is unsustainable if we, put this out so many years. But we were paying it, we were growing, we could manage it, but it was unsustainable. And so the opportunity
what year was
that came to us, this was this was 2009 is when we signed that lease. We started out in that property at 17,000, went up to 24,000 as we got more space, and then that 24,000 went up to 35,000. The economy tanked in 2008, 2009. We had to sign a new lease in 2009, and so a realtor called me and said, "I have a piece of property I want you to see." And so it was in Dade County. We're in Broward County, and we're in Western Broward County, which is suburban. The property he's showing me is in urban inner city Miami Gardens in Dade County. And so we purchased the property from a church that was in need of help. We asked our congregation to come into this community. And it was a challenge because the a move of suburban people into an urban context is very difficult. And so, but we went, and it was very costly financially, but very beneficial experientially, because it put us into the heart of a community where we could have value. And I think there are certain things that all communities need. You need good schools in your community. You need good healthcare systems in your community. You need grocery stores that provide, healthy food options in your community. You need financial centers and businesses in your community, and you need churches in your community. So the church is not the total answer for a community. It is a part of the answer. Without businesses, without solid schools, solid health access to health care, et cetera, then the community still misses what it needs in order to thrive and to be a blessing and to be attractive to other people. Yeah. So I always will want people to come to the community that I live in, but I have to have these other pieces in place in order for that to work. So we try to, in our church, to be a part of helping the community. And I'll use the word change, but to be an influence. So we were in the schools. And so we didn't serve every school. We chose schools that we could have impact. And so we were partners with those specific schools the whole time we're there. And so we do things like when Christmas came around, every kid in the school would get $100 gift certificate. Every kid, for Christmas. What we do in the schools, we make sure that every kid got a book, so we give books away. I have some friends who are children's authors. And so I said, well, how much would it cost me to get every kid in the school a series of the books that you write? We do things like that. We'd make sure that, we participated in the book bags and book packs, but we didn't do as much as that. because during the start of the school year, everybody's giving away book bags and everybody's giving away pencils and school supplies and all of that. So we tried to find what are the cracks, where are the gaps, and let's try to fill in the gaps. We had another program where we did tutoring and we did personal development on the kid side. So we talked about finances and financial literacy on the kid level. We talked about character. We talked about language. So we would teach those kids what I call the universal language of success. And so what I would say to these kids, these are urban inner city kids, you know. And so I said, well, you know, it's different language structure, you know. So I said, there is language that works here, but doesn't work everywhere.
Yeah.
But there is a language that works everywhere, and it also works here. So I want you to learn. I don't want you to lose your language because your language works here. But I do want you to learn this other language that you're going to need, and it's going to work in these other doors that hopefully you'll have an opportunity to go into. So we taught all that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Please. No. Thank you. May I? Good night. Good morning. You know, all of those things, those never change.
And I was actually there for the second merger, and I can attest it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. No, the second merger. We're just finishing it. We're actually, Larry, the final pieces of it. But mergers, you know, in terms of being spiritual, and I consider myself a spiritual person as the foundation of everything that I do. A church merger will test every aspect of, say, I'm a Christian. It will test every aspect of what you believe about your faith. Because the reason that it's hard for them to work is because we want to be first. We want to be recognized. We want to be acknowledged. We want all of that. And the essence of Christianity, the reasons it's so difficult to practice is because the one who founded it taught us that you have to resist that inclination to be first, and you have to flip it and be comfortable not just being last, but sometimes being unseen, unacknowledged. And he taught that, you know, deny yourself, that type of thing. So you have to do some of that if it's going to be successful.
So we hear a lot about, you know, mergers in the business realm. How does a merger come about? You talked about the first one. How does a merger come about, and what are some of the pillars in merging a church? Like, so for instance, if I'm merging two businesses, I would see the activity first business compared to mine and what things are overlapping, what things are we going to keep, what things are we going to let go of, and all these things that we talk about are attached to people. How do you go about that? So I could already imagine merging a church and somebody says, well, I've run this ministry for 12 years, but what do you mean it's not part of the future vision?
Yeah. Oh God, that line. Oh, that line's a killer. You know, it's not part of the vision. So, you know, I was share with you my personal approach, my personal belief. So the reason I approached our pastor, Pastor Terrence Wilson, about merging with our church and him being the lead in that was because of something I fundamentally believe about the church. And that is whatever we emphasize, even all the community service that we did, the community service still is not Christianity. Christianity is this belief in Jesus Christ and this commitment to follow Jesus Christ, and then to invite others through character, lifestyle, and an opportunity, others to follow. So for me, Christianity is rooted in the Great Commission to, you know, go and make disciples of all people. And I think all churches should be working very hard to do that. And these other things are additional things that we do in order to bear witness to Christ. So we went to the schools to bear witness. We fed people during the pandemic and before to bear witness. But ultimately, we should be winning disciples. When a church loses its ability to make disciples, and that can happen over time as culture changes, technologies change, language change. Your church that was successful 30 years ago may not have the capacity to make disciples as new generations emerge. So for me, I found myself though I was surrounded by young people, I served young people, but I was incapable of convincing new young people to come and be a part of what I was doing because I'm in my mid 60s. And so Terrence was, when I talked to him, was 40 years old. He was already leading a ministry where young people were coming and they were thriving and they were growing. And so I said to myself, it's more important for the church to be faithful to what Jesus has called us to do than for the church to be successful in remaining its past identity. And so I was willing to abdicate our past identity for a future.
Mm-hmm.
That's very difficult because the people who've been with me for 27 years, what they are most fond of is the identity that they have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that's not Christianity, because Christianity is about who you can become in the future. And it's always difficult to become someone different than who you've been.
I was a fly on the wall during that process, and I was thinking the entire time, I was like, Pastor Lomax has so much humility because of what was being asked. That required a lot. I saw, and I was like, man, to be able to do that. I know other pastors, and I know a lot of them that would not be able to have that level of humility and understanding to be able to push that vision forward. So it was very commendable, just based on what I saw in that whole process.
Yeah, well, Larry, I appreciate that, and humility has to be something different than being punked. So
Yeah.
you're being punked, if I could use that term. That's kind of urban term, inner city term. It's where you don't have the courage to stand up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Humility is where you can see the big picture. And it's where you say, well, if I stand up for myself, I'm going to sacrifice the potential of the big picture. That's what the cross means. That's what Pilate said. Man, listen. Pilate said, hey, look, I could let you go, man. I could exonerate you. And Jesus said, well, yeah, maybe you think you could. He said, but I'm enslaved to something bigger than this. And so I'll humble myself so that, and even though it's going to be painful and difficult, it's going to be hard, it's going to be gut wrenching. I really don't want to do, sometimes I want to say something, or, I feel like I've been insulted, or, because these processes are very much, human beings are in these processes.
Yeah.
And so, your Christianity is tested. Do you really love people? Or do you say you love people? Do you believe in the vision of Jesus, or do you believe in your own vision more than the vision of Jesus? So yeah,
really good. Awesome. It's clear from your work that serving others is central to your mission. Through your partnerships, you fed families, comforted the bereaved, and supported students. What has been the most rewarding aspect of that work, and how do you measure success in terms of community impact?
I think that if I would say what's been most impactful was what we've been able to see happen in the lives of kids who we have touched through the years. And I would say over time. I mean, I really have, I'm honored to have relationships with kids who are extraordinarily successful. And starting from 1997 up until now. So I'm on the 26th of September, I'm going to Gainesville. One of our students has run in 2 Olympics. She's being honored as a Hall of Famer, track and field in the state of Florida. I had other students who work in Ivy League schools, physicians, lawyers, teachers. I mean, you name it. I mean, I have access to almost any type of professional person that has come through our church, professional athletes, football players, you name, 2 Olympians in our congregation, with gold medals, so
nice.
so for me, what has been the most valuable thing is telling young people to pray, read your Bible, have values, morals, but also you have to put your work in. that
Mm-hmm.
prayer won't do reps. You know,
Woo!
prayer, it just won't. And it takes reps
Yeah.
to be at the best, you know, practice. And so what I tell young people, and I told my grandson this morning, it will take you 30 years to fully mature, 25 to 30 years to fully develop. And so we were able to tell kids in high school, in middle school, elementary school, our slogan academically was this. You could say it, if you said it around a bunch of fountain people, if you said all A's, the next thing they're going to say, and an occasional B. That was the standard. We set a
Mm-hmm.
congregational standard for academic performance. We emphasized it over and over. All A's and an occasional B. And Larry and Leo, what that means is that does not mean you're going to make all A's. What that does
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's what you're going to strive for. The
Yeah.
standard is the standard. And I said, if a
Mm-hmm.
kid goes through school and barely graduates, but his standard is all A's and an occasional B, when he has children, he's going to be able to tell his children, well, I was a C student. That was the best I could do. But the standard is
Yeah.
all A's and an
Yeah.
occasional B. That's what we're shooting for. And so we were able to do that. We're able to partner with schools and share that same type of vision in schools. So the schools knew us, you know, Scott
Yeah.
Lake, North Glade, Carroll City Middle, you know, there was no school that could call us for help. And we would say, we can't help you. We're going to help. We're going to figure out how to help. We always set money aside so that if the call came, we're going to be able to
Yeah.
help. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. We didn't care. If you need this in your school to help these kids perform academically, we want to be a part of that because communities need good schools. But some kids, the kids that we serve, oh man, they're starting out with a disadvantage. And, you know, my kids start out with an advantage. You know, I've been to college, and mother's been to college, you know, wife's been to college. You know, I've got all of this. So that's an advantage. But some of these kids, you know, they don't know. And so we were very much vested in these kids who just needed somebody to show this is the path. This is the
Yes.
preparation you need to do. This is SAT training class. You know, you're going to take this SAT course. Somebody's going to pay for it. So the members of the church would pay, you know, because they
Yeah.
knew the
That's
value
awesome.
of it. So the kids wouldn't have to pay. The members would pay. I would have no problem getting a member and say, we got 20 SAT prep classes. They cost $800 a piece. We need these all to be paid. People are going to give us the $800 so these kids can go through the SAT prep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your heart was open and the congregation saw church languages, caught the vision that you were wanting to impact the community. That's phenomenal. So you've had an incredible organization, things like Progressive Kingdom Baptist Association, 100 Black Men of South Florida, and so many others. Now that you've retired from pastoral leadership, what's next for you? I know you still have a passion for mentoring young people. How are you planning to channel those desires to impact the next generation, to impact the community?
Yeah, well, two things I think are next for me. I hope I can always influence young people. And so I created a company and concept called StartEarly.life. And so what it is based on 5 principles of growth. And those 5 principles of growth have to be applied over a 25, 30-year period. We say 30 years. You know, so what we tell a 25-year-old is for these next 30 years, you need to be focusing on your personal development, relationship development, your professional development, your financial development, and your spiritual development. Spiritual development is a little different than, say, a financial development, because spiritual development is really what I ask these kids to look at it as the foundation upon which you build everything else. And so, but financial development is a real core skill set that you need, because I was just listening to Jerry Jones being interviewed. He says, I don't care what kind of organization you're in. He said, if you don't have any money, he said, you're pretty raggedy. Listen, so that's the truth. And so the church needs to be honest. I always say the church needs to be honest about that. And I'm very honest about that. So that's one of the things I talk about with young people. Over the next 30 years, focus on your personal development. That's your own character, your habits, get rid of your procrastination. your adolescent fears, work on all those things, your relationships, who you hanging with, who you associating yourself with. Are you moving up in terms of your relationship capital, your professional growth? Where do you start? Where do you want to finish? What do you want to be? Your financial, how you managing your money, how you saving it, how you investing it, all of that. Learn that stuff and do it. Don't just learn it. Learning it has no value unless you
Yeah.
do it. And so I knew how to tell the truth a long time before I started doing it. You know, you got to do it. You got to do it. And so, uh, and so that's one of the things that I'm doing. But the second thing that I'm doing is that I'm looking very much into the entrepreneurial world because I want to run a for-profit business. And so for all of my adult life, I've been in the nonprofit space, both with the church and nonprofits that we operated at the church. We had two other nonprofits at the church, one community development and one scholarship. Now, we gave over $300,000 in scholarships during the time that I was pastor of the Fountain Church. And so we have now the Scholarship Foundation that still has about $250,000 in it. And our goal is to raise $1 million. So, but I want to get on the for-profit side because I have a big vision for myself in the for-profit space. And this is what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to go just to sit in a graduation ceremony and see these kids walk across stage and just pick out a kid and say, you know, hey, you know, congratulations. What's your next step? You know, how much you owe? What you owe on student loans? Let's go to the finance office. Get your parents. Pay it off. Get in my car and go. Say, use that, leverage that. And I don't want any credit for it, but I want to be able to do it. Because the way you sometimes people need a boost and some help and some hope. And if you can get out of that college without any student loan debt, because somebody who has the resources, and I want to get into the entrepreneurial world for extra resources. You know, I want to have an abundance of resources. That when I decide that I want to help an organization or an individual, it's not like I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, if I move this from here to there, and I just have to make a decision as to whether or not I want to do it. And so this is where my big vision is. I really want to have, you know, I'm looking in the franchising world. So I want to have 10 profitable franchise units. And I want one of those units, the most profitable unit, to be the one that I use for helping people. Every dime that it makes goes to helping other people. So that's what I'm looking to do, man. So right now I'm planning it. I've been interviewed. I've eliminated some options. I think I have decided on what I'm going to do. And so I'm trying to prepare myself to do it. I got a 10-year window. So I'm 67. So I'm giving myself a 10-year window. And then I really value. I know time is a real issue and what that brings. So, you know, I don't have 30 years. So you see what happens. But that's what I'm doing.
That's exciting. And I saw the twinkle in your eye when you started talking about these things. I know the same energy that you had when you first founded the fountain is still running through you to take on this next phase.
That's so awesome, man. Money in church. That's a topic that comes up a lot on this show. I heard a bishop one time say that the Bible says money answers all things. So if you don't have any money, then you have to be quiet. Awesome. So as a leader with such a long legacy, what advice would you have for young leaders or anyone in ministry looking to make a lasting impact?
Well, Larry, ministry, I've retired, so kind of look at ministry a little differently, you know, since I've left the profession of pastor. And so I'd like for people who consider themselves in ministry to see themselves in ministry in whatever profession they're in. Because it's far greater impact if you're doing what you believe God has called you to do, and you have impact on the people who God allows you to connect with. And you have a far greater impact than the church in many instances, because often the church becomes an enclosed community. And the only people who can really benefit from that enclosed community are those who've been there for years. And if someone new comes, they have a very difficult time penetrating or accessing or becoming a part of that community. But when you're out in the free marketplace, serving and interacting with people, networking, you have an opportunity to minister to be sensitive to people's hurts and pains, to see the emptiness in their lives, though they're successful professionally, they're successful financially, but they are drowning personally. You know,
Yes.
you have an opportunity when you see that, say, hey, listen, what's going on? How can I help you? And if you ask that question, how can I help you? They may say, well, I don't know. I don't even know how to solve this. Well, you mind if I suggest a couple of things to do? And can I keep up with you? Can I hold you accountable a little bit with if you say you want to achieve this? And you'll find a way to talk about your own faith, talk about Christ and how following Christ makes a difference. And I really believe, I really study and kind of read all religions, and I have an appreciation for them, but I just can't find a better leader than Jesus. I just haven't found a better leader, and I'm willing to follow him and what he taught. I roll my dice on that.
You've been deeply passionate about both personal, spiritual, financial. You just talked about one of the two things that are going to be in the next phase of your goals in life. So how has that shaped your leadership approach in ministry? How did that, a lot of times we experience church where it's all spiritual and there's no talk of personal and financial development and foundation. How has that helped you? How does that same deep commitment to growth and service shaped how you pastor and how you're doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, it shaped how I pastored. For example, I just believe that the Bible has a lot of powerful things to teach us. Prayer is very valuable. All the spiritual disciplines are. But electricity costs money. A mortgage costs money. Doing well in an interview requires communication skills. Being able to deal with difficulty requires being able to manage your emotions and your temperament well. And so, in addition to the practice of spiritual principles, there are other principles that are just as important for human beings to master. So I tell people all the time, if you master prayer, if we're going to run a 100-meter dash, you pray. Let me practice. Let's see who wins the race. I'm not saying that prayer doesn't help, but I'm saying if a person practices running that 100-meter and a person just prays, Lord, help me to win the 100 meters, given the same abilities and talents, you're going to lose if you just pray. And so what I've observed in churches is that people come week after week after week, praying and wishing and hoping, and never practicing, grinding, and working. And so you have to combine your prayer. And here's where I teach the practice of prayer matters. You say if you want to build your upper body, do push-ups. You got to do 3 reps of 20. You get to the 3rd rep, you're going to want to quit. God won't do the last 5 push-ups for you. You don't want to do them yourself. But you got to say, God, you may have to say, well, God, I want to quit. But God, give me what I need, the motivation, to get through these last 5. So that's where it comes in. I don't see how I can do this. Show me a door. Show me a crack. Give me an opportunity. God, I don't see an opportunity for me. But God, I'm going to keep working. I keep studying. I'm keep showing up. And you have to do those things. And I think we have to be taught to do those things and that is just as sacred as getting up in the morning, having your personal devotion. Because I think it's sacrilegious, and I'll say this on this podcast, to come to church every Sunday and ask God to do things that you can do yourself. You want God to get you a mortgage. Well, if you save your money, save up enough of it for a down payment, get your credit score right, most financial institutions will provide you with a mortgage. But maybe you want, maybe you want to level up. You don't know exactly what you want to do. Maybe you need to pray for wisdom and understanding. God, I don't know what my next step is. Then that happens, and then so you ask God to help you, but not for God to do it.
And I've heard the old adage, I don't know where I heard this from. When you pray, move your feet.
Move them. Leo, it's hard. It's very difficult. is very, so if you look at the biblical characters, their lives were difficult. Abraham, believing 25 years for a son, trying things that are not ethical and moral and the right thing to do, but I'm trying to do what God has called me to do. Well, maybe this is the way to do it. And you learn, okay, well, that messed up. God, I know I'm supposed to have this son. So there are going to be some mistakes along the way, but keep trying. You see, and the church does not have an adequate theology of failure, because our theology of failure is to punish the person once they fail, rather than see that failure as a part of the step towards maturation. There is no maturation without mistakes, and sometimes very large mistakes. And so our theology of failure and sin is so inadequate because we don't know how to use it to help people to grow.
I have a 12-year-old, and he really, right now in this phase of his life, he really loves basketball. And he hates when everything doesn't go right for him. And I have to tell him that's part of life. Sometimes you don't have good games. Sometimes you miss shots. And sometimes you have great games. But you can't let the results control whether you love doing this or not. Because that's part of what love is. And I use it to teach him, like, me and your mother, we're in love, but sometimes we're not talking to each other.
That's correct.
There's ebbs and flows, and you have to know that this segment of life doesn't mean that everything is terrible. I'm a terrible basketball player. Yeah, you've made a mistake, but God still had the call on Abraham. Hey, look, this promise is still going to be fulfilled. But if he just said, I'm done, I'm throwing, then he would have aborted God's will for him, because he's thinking that his mistake is greater than God's grace. And I think a lot of times we do that in church, and we put away people something that they took that was a misstep, but that could have been part of the maturation, because all things work together, and some of the things in a vacuum look crazy. The Bible makes clear so many individuals in there, every one of them had a shortcoming.
Yeah.
And it tells us we all fall short. But then when somebody falls short, we're like, wait a minute.
Hey, Leo,
sit down, sit in the back of the pews.
Yeah. That's a terrible practice.
And I think also one thing I've noticed in viewing Christians who are aspiring to do greater things, that fear a lot of times paralyzes them, because they feel like if I make a mistake, then all of a sudden God is not with me. All of a sudden God's not gonna help me. When in reality, what we see in the text is many times God, even though people make mistakes, when they're pursuing after something greater, God has a lot of grace for those individuals.
Yes, well, that's the power of the story of Moses that I referenced earlier. Moses' mission in life was always to be the tool to liberate the Hebrew people. Moses left Egypt because he murdered a man. He got out of town.
And buried him.
And buried him. Let me get rid of evidence, And so, there are a lot of reasons after you murder a man to think that, well, whatever, I can't stay here. I can't do this. I've disqualified myself. I've created the most egregious act that I could do. But God meets him outside of that context and say, I want you to go back to that same context and do what, God? And I want you to do the same thing. The reason I put you in the palace to begin with is because I want you to be a tool to liberate your people. And so after the most egregious mistake in his life, he goes back and has the greatest success, because whatever is your strongest characteristic, it's always connected to your greatest flaw.
I'd never thought of Moses having, because whenever we think of the burning bush and God talking to him, telling him to go set his people free, I'm only thinking of like, okay, well, he's hard of speaking, or he's been in the wilderness. But what God was actually asking him to do was go back and face his past. That's awesome. I never thought of that as the thing that he's real. Maybe that was what made him so fearful of going back, because he knew what he left when he was out there for 40 years. We have a few more questions for you, sir, before we wrap up. But with all of the things that you've accomplished, from founding the Fountain Church to creating the Youth Development Institute, what motivates you personally to keep going, even after retirement? We heard of your plans. And the way you were talking like a 25-year-old young man. And you were like, that vision sounded so fresh and so vibrant. What motivates you to keep going?
Man, it's just who I am. Creating anything, I'm not trying to fabricate a person. It's just who I am. So I'm really the same person as I was that when I was pastoring than who I want to be in the business world. It's the same guy, and my motivations are really the same. So I don't have really any personal motivation. I don't have a lot of personal motivations around building a business. I have some, but mostly I want to be able to, one, provide for my family certain things that I want to do, but more than anything else, I want to be able to be of influence where it's needed most. I mean, I'll tell you the things I saw yesterday as I was driving through inner city Dade County. So unfair to say that something like equity should not be at the focal point of policy. Mm-hmm. And it's not because you're trying to give somebody an unfair advantage. It's because people are born with unfair advantages. And it's very difficult to overcome and to compete in this world with these advantages. And there are some schools, you go to some schools, you'll be in awe. You say, oh my God, look at this. Boy, this is magnificent. You go to another school and you'll say, it should be illegal for kids to be assigned to attend a school in this building. It's an unfair advantage. What you have to walk past going to school can be an unfair advantage. So I want to be a part, if a kid has a fire, because one of my slogans is, I'm here for you if you're here for you. If you're not here for you, I can't be here for you. And so if you don't have the desire, the intrinsic motivation to want to do something with your life, I can't create that. But if you have a fire and you want to do something and you can follow instructions and you want to hear what's my next step and how to get there, I think I can help you with that. And so, and that's what I've done at the Fountain. And that's what I want to continue to do. And really, we're all going to die. When I die, I just want, there to be some people who remain, who say that, well, that cat in that casket, he called me up one day and told me, keep be encouraged. And he connected me with somebody that helped me get to the next step. That's what I want to leave as a legacy. I don't want a sign. I don't want a poster. I don't want a plaque. I just want to deposit something in lives that can take it to the next generation.
That's awesome. So you said something that is going to bring up a question that's off script. I think there's some well in your belly right now. You talked about policy. Talk to us about what you believe in terms of the church, politics, and how it intersects. What is the role of the church in influencing policy, in talking about political literacy? There's some people who go down the line on a particular party. What do you have to say about politics? And we're in an election year.
We are in an election year.
Well, I think it's very important for the church to be involved. I've served in predominantly Black churches all of my life. So there's a history and a legacy that these churches have created. So if you look at it like this, Leo, in 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was elected president of the United States, most Black people, 13 million, I think it was, in the United States, were enslaved. By the time you get to around 1870, what has happened in government is that 3 amendments to the Constitution have been: the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery, the 14th Amendment to grant Black people citizenship right, and the 15th Amendment to give Black men the right to vote. Those particular pieces of legislation cannot be ratified without people voting for the persons in Congress and in the Senate. And so
Right.
it is important who sits in these seats and who crafts the policies that actually run and shape our lives. Slavery is not an extreme example. It is an older example. There are communities that don't have safe drinking water. That should be illegal.
Yes.
It should be like a congressman or a senator would say, well, what in the world's going on? We don't have any say. We ought to make it a policy that every community would have safe drinking water. Water is tested every so many. It's a federal law because water is basic. So how can you not have safe drinking water? But when you have power, then if I have power, the thing is, it becomes most important to me is to protect my power. So you can't have the ability to choose the things that I can choose and protect my choices. So it's very important. And so I think I always try to tell our people to vote. I didn't tell them who to vote for, but I said it's important to vote, understand the issues and vote. Yes, absolutely. That's a part, I think, of our Christian duty. And whoever wins, they're the winner. And so we live in submission to that. We may express our disagreement, but that's the president's the president.
Mm-hmm.
Like him or not. I don't like all the presidents, but he's president.
Yes. So the heart of the king is in God's hands.
As a final wrap up to this amazing conversation, we might have to have you on for a second time just to delve deeper into some of these questions. But from your seat, you've talked a little bit about politics. Just as a final question, what would you say is the greatest challenge for the church in the future?
Well, I think it's two things globally. Globally, the greatest challenge for the church globally is to be serious about poverty and famine. Is that there are literally right now millions of people who don't have food to eat each day in a world where there's plenty of food for everyone. And so the Christianization of the world cannot be more important than the humanization of the world. It is a human characteristic to feed somebody. If they're hungry, feed them. So we have to make sure that people have those basic things as a Christian witness. So I say it's global. Locally, globally, and I speak nationally, then I'll come to local. Nationally, church needs to look in the mirror because the church really has no unified standard. So if you were let's say you were from Saturn and you happened to pop into you came to Earth and you ran into somebody who was a Christian and they said, well, in order for you to go to heaven, Saturnite, you have to believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You say, well, how do I get to understand what that is? And so what's recommended to you is that, okay, for the next year, 52 consecutive weeks, go visit Christian churches, sit and listen, and let's come back after 52 weeks and let's talk about what you've learned after listening to messages and teachings in 52 different Christian churches. So what do you think the condition of that person would be? They came back. They went 52 consecutive weeks to 52 different churches. What would their position? What would their condition be?
Confused.
Confused. And so we call ourselves the church in America, but no one can understand Christianity from the way we practice it as a group. We don't have a common voice where we say these are the common things we believe in practice. And it's so divided. It's actually the Christian church that is a big part of the division of the country in which we live. So we need to look ourselves in the mirror and ask if we want to say, what is the faith that we practice together? And it ought to be some common ground. And then locally, the local church, I think, has to learn how to sacrifice itself for others. The most important thing for every local church is survival. The most important thing for Jesus was that he died that others might live.
Wow.
And so sometimes it may be that a church should say, well, we have done our work. Let's give our resources and, whatever we have to somebody else who can push this ball further down the road. And let's not continue to drag this to the graveyard with us. But and so I think that the church needs to be willing to sacrifice itself so that others might live.
Man, you blessed us so much today with your wisdom. I want to thank you for sharing with us your most valuable commodity, like we talked about before, which is your time. Thank you for sharing your incredible stories, your journey, your vision. Absolute honor to have you on the show, and we could hopefully have you back, because I really feel like we're just scratching the surface of, everything that is in you.
Hey, Leo, if I come back, we're going to have as the number one question: who's the greatest, LeBron or Michael?
I'm with that conversation. I'm gonna tease that question, but I'm not gonna give my answer right now. So the next time we have you back, that's gonna be our first question.
Next time. Tee it up with that one next time. First question.
Your story is a true testament to how faith, courage, and service can transform lives. We can't wait to see the incredible impact you continue to make in the next chapter of your journey.
To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Level Up with Leo and Larry. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, Next Level Media Marketing and Key Realty. Join us next time as we continue to turn trials into opportunities and dreams into realities. Until next time.
Peace.
You see how sweet this is?
But you know what's really sweet?
You subscribing.
Subscribe now.
Peace.